What's up YouTube, Demi here with take 2 of my crit Ice Strike Invoker guide with Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. We're gonna run this crypt real quick. It's a tier 15 crypt with Enfeeble, so you can see how much damage we do and how the clear goes. The last video I did of this, my mic kept cutting out, and my apologies for that. I realized that every time I pressed Alt to show like an in-game tooltip or something, it would just stop my mic, so that's my bad. But yeah, here's the clear. You basically just walk up to a pack and you slap it and it explodes. Like, that's it. Once you get to the bosses, you can drop your Tempest Bell. You can drop your Unbound Avatar to do even more damage, but as you can see, the clear is a little silly. This is a level 81 map with Enfeeble. It just feels like you're doing a tier 1 map still. Let me see if I can beeline to the boss real quick. It does lag kind of hard, but I think that's my computer. My computer's from 2016. It needs updated pretty heavily, but we'll get there. Where's the boss at? Crypt is like my favorite map, I think, out of all of the new maps, because it's just very perfect for this build. There's not very many mobs on it total, which sucks, but you can just blow everything up and then you're done. Like, it's just a nice little square. I guess that was the boss. My bad. I thought this was a deadly map boss crypt. It's not. Yeah, there's your general map clear summary. I'm using Neversink's Filter Blade. He finally released for Path of Exile 2. So if you want to get one of his filters, I'll try to remember to link that in the description as well. You can customize them now. It's not just like the default settings. You can completely customize however you want them to look. So I just use a very strict version with like some minor updates to hide things like gold, for example. It still picks it up when I walk over it, but I don't have to worry about like seeing it as a drop anymore, which is getting annoying. Are we almost done? Yeah, there's a little bit left over here. Yeah, you basically just run around, you get power charges for freezing things, and then you freeze constantly with Ice Strike, and then you just reactivate your charge staff with the power charge, you get more damage, and you release those little wave things, and they do a ton of damage, shock things, freeze things. Everything blows up with Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder that chain off of each other, which we've managed to do with the gem setups from stream. I did a stream earlier, and twitch.tv/demi if you want to check that out. But let me learn how to, like, heralds to chain off of each other without using that unique gem or unique ring port. So let's start with the ascendancies. I'm an invoker, as I mentioned. You start with probably your Lead Me Through Grace. This gives you a ton of energy shield and a ton of spirit from your chest piece's energy shield and evasion rating. So you want a hybrid chest piece that has a bunch of evasion and energy shield. You can get like upwards of 1.1k to like 500 evasion or 500 energy shield on a hybrid chest like this. And if you do that, you get like, I don't know, 120 something extra spirit just from your chest. I'm at 100 by default, and when I equip my chest, it goes up to 227, which allows you to use a bunch of auras that we'll go over once we get to the skill gem section. The more evasion energy shield you can get on your chest, the better for this. You don't need spirit from like your chest piece prefixes or your amulet prefixes because of that. You can't get anything from that anyway, so you can free up those mods to get other things on those slots. After that, you go for your Eye on the Thunder. This gives you 10% of your damage as extra lightning, helps you shock things because you're doing more lightning damage. And additionally, every time you shock an enemy, you have a chance to create shock ground, which automatically shocks the things around whatever you shocked. So this also helps for just spreading your shock and allowing your Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder to chain off of each other. After that, you grab Unbound Avatar. This is a skill that gives you, I think, 40% more. I have to press Alt here, so forgive me, my mic's gonna cut out. Yeah, so it's 40% more elemental damage and then a more elemental chance to inflict ailments and whatnot, which helps you shock freeze and even more than you already did, which is great. And then for the last one, I have the Eye on the Blizzard. 10% of damage is extra cold, and on freezing enemies creates chilled ground, which just slows them down. Basically, it's another additional bit of damage and a defensive layer because everything's usually slowed when it's next to you. Skill tree itself is mostly just crit stuff and then evasion ES to help you survive a little bit. Movement speed where you can get it. I'm grabbing this as my last node, basically. I'm getting this as my last node, sorry. I just grabbed this with my last 2 levels, and I'm grabbing this with my next level. I'm level, what am I, 92? So it's pretty far along on the tree, but this is all crit. This is evasion, energy shield stuff. more crit stuff, more attack speed, evasion, energy shield. This node is pretty important. This allows you to convert your frenzy charges that you gain from one of our auras to power charges, and power charges feed your other aura that gives you crit chance, and they also help you spam your charged staff, which requires power charges to activate. So this is like a super important keystone for us. This gives you more energy shield per evasion on body armor. Great. We got some more crit stuff. And then this node, these two nodes, sorry, are pretty important. This lets your hits ignore non-negative elemental resistances of frozen enemies. So once you freeze an enemy, you just hit it like it has 0% resist. It's kind of like the old Inquisitor. When you crit, it does, it just ignores their resist, which is also here. But because I have that node and I freeze everything all the time with Ice Strike, I don't need this ascendancy. And that requires it to crit. I only have about 50% crit, so that's 50% effectiveness on this. This is just, as soon as they freeze, all of your hits ignore their resists, down to 0%, which is great. So you don't need pen, you just freeze things and then they just die. They don't have any more resists. This one is just 50% increased damage with hits against frozen enemies, so a bit more damage here. And then Jewels we'll go over in a sec. Down here we get even more crit chance. I don't know why my inventory is open. Down here we get crit damage with quarter staves, which is what we're using. These heralds bonuses, if you run out of spirit because your chest isn't as much evasion ES as mine, you can grab these reduced reservation skills here, which should give you like 2 or 3, I think like 1 to 3 spirit per, depending on how it rounds for you. But these are just damage while affected by a herald. We have 2 heralds, Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder, so we get 50% cold, 50% lightning. Great. More evasion, bunch of dex stuff here. More evasion here. This node gives you attack speed per 15 dex. We have about 200 dex, so that's like what, 10 to 15% attack speed. And then if you get dexterity on your gear, or as you get more nodes with dex, this gives you even more attack speed, so that's great. We get some melee damage down here, as well as strike range and melee damage. Strike range lets you jump, I think, a little bit further, or it just makes it so your strikes can hit from farther away, which is nice as well. And then, of course, even more crit chance, crit damage. And then attacks have crit chance. So this is like a base crit thing, so it increases our base here from 10 to 11, and that means that every like 10% crit that you get on the tree is about 1% additional crit to your crit chance. Oops. So for example, we have 5 or 40% crit chance here. If I like take off, let's see, can I take this off without anything falling off? Yes, kind of. So that 25% chance there is giving us like 5%. Which I think is because something's falling off. So maybe that's not quite correct. But let's go to the jewels now. You need 1 ruby jewel with gain rage on melee hit. Rage is a 1% more damage per stack up to 30, which means that's 30% more damage as you just clear the map. You're going to get rage constantly from hitting anything. And usually by the time you get to the boss, you'll be sitting at 30 rage, or you can build it up on the boss at that point. The other mods, you just want like generic damage or AoE. I think you can get attack damage, phys damage, crit. What else? Increased area of effect on rubies. There's a bunch of other stats that might be useful on rubies, but you mainly just need to make sure you have 1 ruby with gain rage on melee hit. The rest of the mods are like just a little bit extra damage. The rest of your jewels, you're probably going to get emeralds, because emeralds can have quarterstaff mods, so you can get damage and attacks with quarterstaffs. You can get generic damage, attack damage, cold damage, attack speed, evasion rating, energy shield. If you get a sapphire, I believe you can get that on it. And then I have 1 gem with blind, but all the other mods are just the ones I just mentioned, like attack speed, damage with quarter staves. This one's the same, attack speed, quarter staves. Damage against rare and uniques is nice for extra little bit of boss damage, but it's not required. It's just like something that helps. There's like a ton of stats on jewels you can get, so just check PoEDB if you're not sure what you can get on emeralds or other jewels, and just like put them all on PoE trade and tell it to look for things that have at least 3 of them, and you'll find a bunch of those. This one's the exact same. It's just generic. I could just buy a bunch of gems for really cheap that do everything I want here. So for gear, with Ice Strike is 80% of Fizz converted to physical. So you want 80% of Fizz converted to cold. So you want a high physical damage quarterstaff. It has to be a quarterstaff to use Ice Strike. So your prefixes, you want all Fizz damage, flat damage. If you can get like additional cold damage or lightning damage to attacks, or increase elemental damage with attacks, or even just hybrid Fizz flat or Fizz accuracy, that's great. You also need to make sure for suffixes that you grab this critical damage bonus here. For some reason, on the weapon itself, the critical damage bonus that you get as a suffix is a multiplier to your total crit damage here. I need another quarterstaff to show you this that doesn't have it. 1 second. Let me find one. This does not have the suffix. If you look right here, 558, because this has 25%. If I take it off, it goes all the way down to 446. So we're losing about 100% crit damage because of that 25. It's just a multiplier to this, which is pretty important. So try to get one that has crit damage as a suffix. It'll give you a ton of damage overall. If you can get attack speed, or you get like mana on kill, life on kill, anything like that as another suffix, great. Or even base crit chance, great. Those are all great. Helmet, you're gonna want energy shield or energy shield evasion, or just pure evasion with life resist, crit chance. Crit chance is the only damage mod you can get on here, so basically just life resist, energy shield evasion. Chest piece we kind of already talked about, but you need a bunch of evasion and a bunch of energy shield. You want a hybrid chest. If you can get one with the increased movement speed implicit, that's nice. That gives you like just more clear speed basically. Anywhere you can get movement speed is great. Otherwise, life resist. Chaos res is nice. If you can try to cap all 4 resistances, great. I don't have quite chaos res capped. I think I'm missing like 1.5 rolls to do that. So if I get better rings or a better chest, I could potentially cap that later. Belt, or I can get chaos res here. Belt, you want life, and then you probably are going to need some strength and some int on your gear to make sure you have enough to level your gems. So I have strength here, resist, some charm slots. If you can get an additional charm slot, great. You can also get +2 charm slots on your belt, which will allow you to have a third here. I don't really know what I'd use for a third, so I'm just using a stun charm and a freeze charm, because those are the 2 main things that try to kill me in maps. But if you can get a third charm, maybe like poison, when you get poisoned, antidote charm is good, or chaos resistance charm if you're not quite capped like I am would be helpful. But whatever you can get as a third, if you want it, you can get +2 as a suffix here. Boots, you want movement speed. It goes up to 35%. These are only 30, so you could do better. And then life resist, evasion, energy shield. If you can get reduced freeze duration, you can get that on your boots and your chest, I believe, as a suffix. So at least one of those spots, try to get reduced freeze duration, because freeze is a big killer. If they have cold damage, you're going to get frozen because you're just a life build that has not a lot of defenses or chance to not be frozen. So get some reduced freeze duration if you can. Gloves, these can have critical damage bonus, but unlike the weapon, it's additive, so it's not super important. You can also get attack speed. You can get mana per enemy killed. You can get flat lightning to attacks, flat cold to attacks, flat fizz, life. But again, evasion or energy shield bases are great, or combination hybrids. Amulet, evasion, energy shield, life, accuracy, crit damage. If you need some strength or intelligence, go for it. I'm gonna have to press Alt here to show you overwhelming strike, which is gonna cut my mic, so look at that real quick. It's 20% crit hit chance for attacks and 20% crit hit damage for attacks. And a little bit of sun buildup, which is great. It's not that expensive to do that. To do the, what are they called? I don't remember what these, to allocate the thingy, you just use oils. To figure out which oils you need, you go to your skill tree, and again, you press Alt. So this is the one I have allocated. It's Despair, Envy, and Disgust. I believe those are like 3 to 5x each. So that Anoint, I think is what it's called. It's like 10 to 15x to do that, and it gives you the equivalent of a node that's super far away that we couldn't normally get, and it gives you more damage. There are other options. I think this, where to go? This one, Climate Change, is probably the best one for your single target damage against bosses. It gives you 25% of your cold damage, which is, 80% of your total damage on Ice Strike, as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. And because of this node, once you freeze them, it ignores their elemental resistances. That's probably about like a 20% more damage multiplier. But I checked this one, and the oils that you need for it, one of them's like 11 divines or something crazy. So this is like a super late game thing. If you're rich, you can anoint this one on your amulet, but I don't have that yet, so it's just something to look at. There's a bunch of other useful ones. If you find any node that you like, you could just slap it on there. Just search for something useful, basically. There's a ton of them. I don't know. You just pick whatever you want. The one I chose was just like generic damage and crit, but there's probably other ones that are better, but they might be more expensive. I don't know what they are offhand. Other gear. So, gloves I kind of talked about. Rings are next, I believe. So, rings, you want as much resistance as possible, as well as you're going to need one unset ring to be able to run all the auras that we're running. Because of how much spirit we have, you can run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 auras with supports and still have some spirit left over, potentially more if you have a better chest. So you're gonna need one unset ring. The other ring can be whatever you need, and just get as much resist as you can out of them, basically. If you're going to use these, what are they called? Sorry, I forget the names of all these new things. Catalysts. I didn't play leagues after I quit PoE in like 2019, so these things you can kind of do themed rings, basically. Like some of these enhance cold damage or cold modifiers, for example. So if you get a ring that has cold resists, cold damage, cold to attacks, like this one, I'm using this to increase those modifiers by up to 20%. So I get more flat cold, more percent cold, and more percent cold res. And the other ring, you could do the same thing, but with like lightning damage, for example. This is not a very good themed ring. I'm just throwing lightning percent on it because it has flat to attacks. But you do want to get some amount of flat lightning or flat cold to attacks, ideally flat lightning, because when we get to the Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder interactions, you kind of want to have both so you can enable those two to use those flat damages to like do the opposite elemental effect that they already have on them. So Herald of Ice, you want to have flat lightning so that it can shock, for example. This has flat lightning, this is flat lightning, this is flat cold, and then, you know, just cold lightning, whatever. What did I not talk about? I think that's all the gear slots. Oh yeah, potions, you just want increased amount recovered, increased amount recovered. My belt has mana recovery rate, which actually enables me from flasks. So like, as I'm swinging against bosses, you can see this drains pretty fast, but my potion has so much regen from those belt mods that it actually overwhelms how fast I can burn it, which is kind of annoying. So if I don't have that, it lasts a bit longer, you see? So maybe don't go for that. Or if you have that, maybe re-roll your mana flask to not be as an increased amount recovered. Maybe get some other mod like less charges used or something, so you can use it for longer before it hits the top. Once you hit max mana, your potion stops working, even though it's not totally done giving you that mana. So it's kind of a weird balancing act there, but it's not super important. All right, let's get into the gem links next. So your main skill is Ice Strike, and in order of priority, you're probably going to want to do it something like this. So Martial Tempo for attack speed, Conk Effect for 40% more damage, Primal Armament for 25% more weapon elemental damage, which this is 80% cold, so that's pretty good. And then the every time you freeze, you get 35% of damage is cold damage. So this happens constantly. This is basically 100% uptime on this. For your last mod, I don't really know what I'd use. If your mana costs are getting crazy, you could use the less mana cost one. I forget what it's called. You could also use like Inevitable Critical or some other mod here. I don't really know, because 6-socket jeweler orb thing is really expensive. It's like 5 or 6 divines, which is probably more than all the gear I'm wearing. So I don't have that yet. I've just been going off what I find. Charge Staff is like your added lightning to attacks buff. So you use this with your power charges. You eat the power charges, you get flat lightning, and then it casts a shockwave when you swing, which is also fizz to lightning damage, so that high fizz damage weapon helps here as well. I have it linked to if you shock, it has a 50% chance to shock enemies in a radius around it, which applied with our Ascendancy chance to shock, make shock ground. This just helps you spread shocks everywhere, and shocking things gives you about 20% more damage. Yeah, it takes 20% increased damage, so that's like a 20% more damage multiplier, which is really good. Sorry, every time I press my push to talk, it clicks basically. So I also have it linked to close combat, so when things are right in front of me, like if you're DPSing a boss, this gets 25% more damage. I have Maim on hit. Maim gives them 30% less movement speed and 15% less evasion, which is like an accuracy multiplier, so it makes them easier to hit basically. But it also means that because this is like a ranged attack, when you're swinging with it, it goes out to like here, maybe from here. That means that they're slowed and it takes them longer to get to you, so you have more defenses there. I also have it linked to Execute, which is 40% more damage against enemies that are on low life. Low life is 35% in this game, I believe. Yeah, so that means that once the boss gets to like 35% or less, you start dealing more damage with this. It's just like, I preferred that over Culling Strike, because Culling Strike doesn't work on normal mobs or magic mobs for some reason, and this does, so I switched it to this. Tempest Bell is like, you drop this bell, you hit things with Ice Strike, you get combo, you drop the bell. The bell does damage when it lands, and it also does damage when you hit it. So the impact when you slam it on the ground is about 20k damage, and then when you actually hit it, it does an additional huge amount of damage, and you can hit it really fast. But as you add ailments to it, so if you freeze it or shock it, it causes those shockwaves to also deal extra damage of that type. So if I'm freezing it, it gets extra cold damage. If I'm shocking it, it gets extra lightning damage, which is just great. It does a ton of damage, and it gets our, if they're frozen, it doesn't have to worry about resistances, so freezing and shocking it is good. It just hits with a ton of extra damage. I have it linked to more melee physical damage and less attack speed, because only that initial swing to drop the bell is affected by the less attack speed, so it's just 35% more damage basically. I also have it linked to this for 50% increased crit chance against immobilized enemies. Immobilized freeze counts as immobilization, so this is just 50% increased crit chance basically. You're going to freeze the boss, the bell's going to land, you're going to blow it up by hitting the bell and the boss at the same time. I also have it linked to +1, so you could have 2 bells out. Makes it last a little less, but you get 2, which means you can hit the boss and 2 bells and just do an insane amount of damage. But most bosses for me tend to die before I even get this first bell or second bell down, sorry. So this isn't super useful yet. You could probably swap this out for increased duration or something if you wanted instead. And then I also have it linked to heft for even more maximum physical damage. There are other options here. You could potentially use elemental focus, I think. It would prevent your bell from shocking or freezing, but it would still be able to deal that extra cold and lightning damage, so that's up to you. I've been enjoying this instead because it still helps me shock with the bell, you know. All right, so let's get into the heralds now. These are the these two tend to chain off of each other once you have them set up like this. Stream helped me figure out this setup, so thank you guys for that. If you have your Herald of Ice linked to Lightning Infusion, it converts the cold damage that it does to lightning about halfway, so you get a good chunk of lightning damage, which enables it to shock. And Herald of Ice shatters frozen enemies, right? But Herald of Thunder, when you kill a shocked enemy, it gives you bolts, and the bolts, we have them set up to freeze, so they freeze, the Herald of Ice kills them, and then that shocks them, and then that procs Herald of Thunder again, and it just kind of chains off of itself, so you get big screen-wide bolt and cold explosions, which is awesome. So I have it linked to Lightning Fusion to help it shock, 40% more AoE to also help it hit more things. I have it so that it can chain off screen. Herald of Ice is what chains farthest, so this is what gives it more damage as it gets farther away from you. Long shot, and then I have it linked to Conduction to have even more chance to shock, because it's only I don't know, what is that, a third lightning damage, or 40% lightning damage, something like that. This helps it shock more reliably, which helps you get more Herald of Thunder bolts, because killing a shocked enemy gives you a bolt, and it causes those attack hits to release those bolts, which heal, deal attack damage, and then hit all the things around it, which we have linked to extra cold damage. So again, we're converting it to about 50% cold damage here, so it has a good chance to freeze things. We also have it linked to glaciation, so it causes more freeze buildup, more likely to freeze, so that Herald of Ice can blow it up and then shock things, and then Herald, it just chains. And then we also have it linked to Innervate. If it kills a shocked enemy, which it will probably be shocked because of Herald of Ice, or because of Charge Staff, or because of our Ice Strike extra lightning damage on it. Things get shocked a lot. This helps you, if the Herald of Thunder tends to kill it, then you get extra lightning damage for 3 seconds, which while you're clearing maps is usually up most of the time. I also have linked to Cold Pen. Even though our crits, if they're frozen, ignore resistances, usually stuff that's dying to these two, it might not be frozen, so it might need this. This is not a super efficient link. I don't really know what to put in here. You could put a +1 level gem maybe to Thunder skills, or Lightning skills, sorry, if you want it to be higher level instead, which would be good, but I just have this in there for now because I don't know what else to put in there. All right, other auras, let's see. In order of priority, you probably need Combat Frenzy first. This is what gives you your Frenzy charges, which are converted to your power charges with that note on the tree that we talked about. Where'd it go? This one, Resonance. So this is what gives you those charges when you freeze, which is, all the time with Ice Strike. You get a Frenzy charge, which is then converted to a power charge. Those power charges are used to feed Charge Infusion. Charge Infusion gives you 18% more critical hit chance while you have a power charge. That's basically 18% more multiplier. That converts our, 40% crit on this skill to about 50% crit, which is pretty reliable. After that, I would say Grim Feast is probably your next priority, and then Wind Dancer and Ghost Dance are probably your last two to get if you don't have enough spirit. But Grim Feast is a 50% chance on kill to give you a little remnant on the ground. It's like a little white ball or a little white fragment looking thing. And that gives you 132 energy shield instantly and up to double your current energy shield. So I have usually about 5.6k energy shield while mapping. until I get to the boss, and then it's like there's nothing else to kill, so it's just me versus the boss. But I have twice my energy shield pool, so I usually have enough to burst it before I can get through my ES. After that, if you have the spirit left, you probably want to prioritize. I guess these are both equally important. Wind Dancer gives you 19% more evasion per stage up to 4 stages. So that's like 80% more evasion. That's a pretty big multiplier to how much you can dodge. And then when you get hit through your evasion, it'll trigger Gale Force. That Gale Force is like an AoE hit around you, and we have it linked to Blind, so it blinds them. And Blind gives them 20% less accuracy and evasion, so it multiplies your evasion even further alongside the Wind Dancer debuff. But it also does like quite a big amount of damage. So like it tends to kill the white mobs that are hitting you next to you, for example, or sometimes even magic mobs. And then that can also trigger your Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder chain. So it's just a good defensive buff that has a little bit of a defensive thing if it procs. Ghost Dance gives you 5% of your energy shield. Sorry, gives you energy shield when you get hit equal to 5% of your evasion. And with our current stacks, we're at about 13k evasion. You can do a lot more than this. I don't have evasion on my helmet or my gloves or my boots. I believe you can get like 400 or 500 or even 1,000 on your helmet. Gloves you can get a couple hundred, boots you can get a couple hundred. So if you had those, you could probably get upwards of like 20k evasion, and 5% of that is 1,000 ES when that procs instantly. It just eats one of your ghost shrouds. I think I have up to 4 ghost shrouds most of the time. 5 actually. So you could get, if you had 20k evasion and these all went off, you would get 5k ES back instantly. I don't think you can overflow your ES, but that's still a lot of instant healing when you do get hit through your evasion, and we have 82% chance to dodge most things. So it's pretty uncommon that we do get hit, but when you do get hit, you get your ES back instantly, and then it procs this and hits them away from you and blinds them. So there's like a lot of defensive things happening there. I think that's all of our gems, that's all of our gear, that's our ascendancies, that's our skill tree. I don't know what else I need to talk about. I'm sure I forgot something, but if I did, feel free to ask in the comments below. Fully buffed, I believe my Ice Strike goes to 300 to 400k in maps when you pop your Unbound Avatar, and you've done all your crits recently, and you have your fully used 3 power charge staff buff. It gets a lot, and then you of course ignore their resistances on crit once they're frozen. Or sorry, you ignore the resistances when they're frozen, which is a lot of the time. So yeah, that's my current guide, my current build. I'm level 92. If you want to see this character live, I stream on twitch.tv/demi now. I'm going to try to stream every day or 3, I don't know yet. And I'm going to see how far I can push this. This is my only character in PoE 2, and I think I'm going to try to take it to 100 just for funsies. And see if I can like keep pushing the damage up further and further and further once I get more gear. None of my gear costs more than like a divine per piece. Most of them are a lot less than that. So it's a fairly budget character. It works really well in maps. It's got a good single target. The only thing it has issues with is against bosses. You might run out of mana because you're swinging so fast. But if you get a little bit of mana leech, that usually fixes itself, even though it's not that much. You're not doing that much phys damage, but 5% of like 400 is enough per swing that you'll usually sustain. And then if you're not, you have your mana pot as well. So hopefully y'all enjoyed. Sorry for the mistakes on the first video where it was cutting out my mic. If this is better, let me know. Leave a like, subscribe, comment, join the Discord, scream on, I don't know. I don't have any other, I deleted Twitter. Sorry about that. That place is a shithole. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. That'll be Demi out. Thanks for watching.